This isn't the Wild West you saw in movies. This is the version they didn't want you to know. You trudge through the dust-caked main street of a town that doesn't officially exist on most maps. The buildings lean slightly like they've been holding their breath for a century too long. And above your head, vultures draw lazy circles as if someone's already told them you wouldn't last long. There's a saloon up ahead. Its swinging doors groan like they're tired of new arrivals. And you can't help but wonder how many people walked in and never walked back out. Inside, the air is thick with tobacco, sweat, and something else you can't quite place, possibly old gunpowder or the collective despair of bad poker hands. The floor sticks to your boots. Not metaphorically. Something has congealed down there. A blend of spilled beer, spit, and broken dreams. You brush past a man with half an ear and a scar that suggests he's probably lost more than poker games in this place. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, post your location and the current time in the comments. I love seeing where my fellow night travelers are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself drawn to the long, battered bar. It looks like it's been punched more times than some of the regulars. The bartender doesn't greet you. He slides a cloudy shot glass toward you and mutters something that might have been a welcome or a warning. Either way, you drink. It tastes like burnt wood and regret. Welcome to your first real Western saloon. Historians agree that saloons began popping up across the frontier in the early 1800s. Grown like weeds around mining camps, cattle drives, and railroads. But what they don't tell you is how each one had its own unique scent of violence and desperation. This one? It smells like someone recently fired a gun. And no one wants to talk about it. Over in the corner, a man is getting patched up with whiskey and a sewing needle. Because actual doctors are for people who can afford to leave town. Across the room, a brawl erupts with the casual inevitability of sunrise. A bottle smashes. A chair flies. No one flinches. The piano keeps playing, badly but relentlessly, as if even the pianist knows to never stop unless he wants to be part of the brawl. Here's the part that never makes it into the movies. The blood on the floor is usually cleaned up by morning. But not always, and sometimes, the same guy who shot someone the night before is sitting at the breakfast table with you the next day, sharing bacon like he didn't just ruin someone's ribcage. You probably won't survive this. By the way, just thought I'd let you know. There's a mirror behind the bar, cracked down the center like it knows the secrets of everyone who's ever stared into it. A man next to you laughs too loudly at nothing. You notice his pistol's still warm. Did he fire it tonight? This morning? Does it even matter? The sheriff's in the corner booth, drinking on the job, which is also his only job. He's missing 3 fingers, but he still wins every poker hand. Curious? Want a historical fact to ground yourself before the room starts spinning? In 1867, Abilene, Kansas, boasted over 24 saloons for fewer than 2,000 residents. That's one saloon for every 83 people. Most churches couldn't compete. Some scholars still debate whether saloons were necessary evils or the literal foundations of social life out west. Honestly, it depended on the whiskey and the company. The bartender slaps down a second shot beside you without asking. It's darker than the first. Probably rotgut, a charming nickname for poorly distilled alcohol often laced with turpentine, tobacco juice, or even formaldehyde. Fringe rumor has it some establishments used gunpowder to give it a kick. You drink it anyway, because in a place like this, refusing a drink can be as dangerous as accepting one. A man enters behind you, whistling low and off-key. Everyone turns. You can almost hear the temperature drop. No one says his name. He just walks to the back table, lights a match with his boot, and stares at you like he's reading your thoughts through your spine. That, or he's wondering how fast you'll fold when he raises you your life. Here's a fun tidbit. Some frontier saloons had trapdoors beneath certain tables. If you lost big or started trouble, they didn't toss you out, they dropped you through the floor. Was it real? Was it just a story barkeeps spread to keep drunks in line? Historians still argue whether it ever actually happened. But one thing's certain: fear is cheaper than security. You head for the door. But it feels farther away now. The room bends slightly, and everyone seems to be looking at you. Just barely. Not enough to start something. Just enough to let you know you're not from here. Outside, the desert wind slaps your face with dust. You spit blood or whiskey or both. You're alive, for now. One saloon down, 100 more to go. Better get moving. The West doesn't wait for anyone. The piano never stops playing. It doesn't matter how many bottles break, how many fists fly, or who just got hauled out back with a knife still humming in their ribs. Somehow, that piano keeps pounding away. You wonder if the player is even alive, or if they just stuffed a scarecrow behind the keys with a hand crank and called it entertainment. The tune is lively but off-kilter, like it's always half a beat from unraveling. Much like everyone else in the room, you ease back into the saloon, and nothing's changed, except now there's a fresh patch of sawdust covering what might have been someone's tooth, or a bullet fragment. The man at the piano wears a tattered bow tie and the vacant expression of someone who's seen more than he cares to remember. He plays with one hand, the other's wrapped in a dirty bandage. Nobody's asked why. You take a seat near the piano, careful to choose the one with the fewest bloodstains. It's close enough to observe, far enough not to be asked to join in. There's a certain code in places like this. Don't make eye contact unless you're ready to buy a drink, fight, or confess something shameful. In the movies, saloons always feel choreographed. In reality, it's a barely controlled ecosystem. Think of it like a beehive, but the bees carry revolvers and cheat at cards. Every table is its own orbit of tension. There's the cattle driver still wearing his spurs indoors, clinking like a threat. There's the lady in red sipping something clear and dangerous, eyes sharp as shattered glass. And of course, the old-timer who's been sitting in the corner since the gold rush. Probably hasn't blinked since Lincoln died. Fact check. By the 1870s, most saloons employed some form of music, usually a piano or fiddle player, to drown out the chaos and make people feel at ease. Ease being a generous term for less likely to murder someone mid-hand. Music was strategic. It set the mood. It muffled the screams. Some scholars argue that the piano was the real heartbeat of frontier towns. More constant than the sheriff, the preacher, or the postmaster. Then again, it's hard to trust a heartbeat that skips every fourth note. You glance at the ceiling. Bullet holes. Always bullet holes. Some towns made a game of it. Locals would try to fire a shot straight up through the wood and guess where it'd land upstairs. A few unlucky guests discovered the game a little too late. There's a persistent rumor that one saloon in Arizona had a rule: one shot into the ceiling per customer. Supposedly, they patched it every Sunday. Historians still argue whether this tradition was ever real or just whiskey-soaked folklore. But up there, you see the holes, and maybe you hear a whisper of laughter from the floorboards above. The music changes tempo. Faster now. The pianist starts humming along. There's a moment when everyone seems to lean forward just a bit, like the saloon collectively knows something's coming. And sure enough, the front doors bang open with such force they bounce back like startled jaws. A man staggers in, shirt ripped, face bleeding, still holding a cigar that somehow remains lit. He shouts someone's name, a name you don't catch, but everyone else seems to know. Two men stand, slow and heavy, and the tension spikes like static on your skin. The pianist doesn't stop playing. In the far back corner, a mirror reflects the whole thing. You realize the saloon is designed for visibility. There are no real blind spots, just cleverly placed shadows. It's a stage, really. Every drink poured, every bet called, every punch thrown is theater. And everyone's in the cast whether they bought a ticket or not. A quirky tidbit. There are reports of pianists who rigged their instruments with hidden compartments to store guns, cash, or whiskey. Some even reinforced the wood beneath the keys, so if bullets flew, they could duck behind the piano for cover. One man in Tombstone was rumored to have a revolver holster built into the bench. He never had to stop playing to defend himself. Efficiency. Frontier style. You watch the confrontation unfold. Words you can't hear are exchanged. A pistol appears, then disappears again. Nobody gets shot this time. Just a lot of pointing and swearing and that low hum of threat you're learning to recognize. The bartender pours drinks for both sides. That's diplomacy out here. Pour now, clean later. The piano rolls on. There's a moment when you think, just maybe, you could stay in a place like this. It's dangerous, yes, but it's honest in a way that's almost comforting. No one hides their intentions. If someone wants you dead, they don't gossip, they challenge you. If someone wants your money, they sit across from you at a table and earn it with a bluff and a twitchy eye. Or they rob you in the alley. But hey, details. Then, just as you begin to relax, the piano hits a sour note. The pianist coughs. Blood. He plays another 2 chords and collapses forward. Silence. Someone, maybe the bartender, maybe a ghost, drags the man away. Another man steps up, wipes the keys with a dirty rag, and starts playing the same tune like nothing happened. No one claps. No one mourns. The piano never stops playing. You find yourself drawn to the poker table like a moth to a flame, or maybe a fly to a Venus flytrap. Either way, it's probably going to end with you missing something important. Fingers, dignity, a month's wages. You slide into the open chair, trying to act like you've done this before. The dealer doesn't look up. He just shuffles like his hands are on autopilot and his soul left 2 towns ago. The table smells of cigar smoke, spilled whiskey, and anxiety. There's a stack of mismatched chips in the center, stained and scuffed, just like the men around them. A bounty hunter with one eye, a railroad drifter with inked knuckles, a prospector who won't stop giggling to himself, and a gentleman in a cravat who looks like he wandered in from a Dickens novel. Sipping absinthe and judging everyone silently. Buy-ins 10. The dealer grunts. You slide your coin forward. It disappears like magic. Welcome to the most expensive math lesson of your life. Now, poker wasn't just a game in the Wild West, it was the game. A mix of chance, intuition, and performance art. The stakes were rarely just money. Reputation, territory, even freedom wrote on those cards. Doc Holliday, for example, was known more for his poker skills than his dentistry. Historians agree he could outplay most men with a busted lung and a loaded Colt on the table. And often did. But the real trick to surviving these games wasn't winning. It was losing gracefully. Because when you win too big or too fast, people start asking questions. Questions like, are you cheating? Or worse, are you lucky? And in this room, luck makes you a target. Your first hand is garbage. A 2, a 5, and a king with a chip out of it. You fold. Smart move. The prospector across from you laughs again. Still no one knows what's so funny. Maybe he's bluffing. Maybe he's not even playing. Hard to say. There's a strange rhythm to poker out here. It's not about the cards. It's about the people. You're studying the guy next to you more than your own hand. Is he breathing heavier when he draws? Did his eye twitch when the flop landed? You realize, too late, that everyone else is watching you just as closely. A mainstream fact. Wild West poker games were often rigged. Marked cards, loaded dice, even mirrors in booths. Saloons were known to employ shills, fake players who lured newcomers into games just to fleece them. Some historians debate whether certain legendary wins were legit or simply part of a long con. But here's the twist. Even when players knew the game was crooked, they played anyway, because sometimes, losing with flair was better than winning and ending up dead in a ditch. The gentleman in the cravat lays down 4 queens. The bounty hunter folds with a snarl. You pretend not to sweat. The dealer passes out a new round. Someone coughs. You wonder if it's tuberculosis or just bad whiskey. A quirky little tidbit? Some players used human bones for chips. Actual carved finger bones. Especially in more remote camps where currency was tight. There's even a tale, likely exaggerated, of a poker game in Nevada where a man used his own toe as collateral. He lost. The other guy took it. The next hand is better. 2 8s. You stay in. The pot builds. People lean in. The piano hums behind you like a pulse. Someone raises. Then the prospector raises again, without even looking at his cards. Classic lunatic move, or brilliant misdirection. You can't tell. The bounty hunter growls and matches it. You go all in. The room pauses. Nobody speaks. Then, snap. The drifter flicks his cards forward. The bounty hunter slams his down. The prospector just laughs and throws his into the air like confetti. Your pair of 8s holds. You win. And immediately regret it. The bounty hunter doesn't say anything. He just stares. You feel the heat of that one-eyed glare burning into your skin. He lights a match on the buckle of his boot. Then snuffs it out without lighting anything. Message received. You gather your chips slowly. Like they might explode. Your hands tremble just enough for everyone to notice. The bartender watches from across the room, wiping the same glass for the 4th time this hour. Then the gentleman in the cravat leans toward you and whispers. You might want to lose the next hand. Just a bit. For balance. You nod. Poker etiquette in the Wild West wasn't about fairness. It was about survival. Cheating was expected. Losing was an art form. And if you couldn't manage either with grace, you had better have a fast draw, or an exit plan. The next hand? You fold instantly. The prospector smiles at you for the first time. 1 gold tooth, 3 black ones, and a sense of shared understanding. You're not a threat anymore. For now. Outside, someone fires a shot in the air. Inside, the cards keep dealing, and the pianist keeps playing. You lean back and exhale. But something tells you the real games haven't even started yet. You wake up with a taste in your mouth like someone poured gasoline into a barrel of regret and dared you to drink it. And you did. Because out here, you don't ask what's in the glass. You just ask how fast it'll hit. Back at the bar, the bottle's still uncorked. The bartender eyes you like a man who's watched too many people make the same bad decision. You nod once. He pours. The liquid sloshing into your shot glass is thick, amber, and slightly green around the edges. That can't be good. You sniff. It bites back. This isn't whiskey. This is something else. Something brewed in a bathtub, strained through an old shirt, and aged for approximately 23 minutes. It's called tarantula juice. A real thing, sort of. On the frontier, booze was less a beverage and more an experiment. Traditional whiskey was hard to come by, expensive, and usually reserved for the rich, or at least the moderately clean. Everyone else drank rotgut, a delightful term for home-brewed concoctions made from whatever was lying around, raw alcohol, chewing tobacco, chili powder, gunpowder, turpentine. Occasionally, folks went blind. Sometimes, they just died. And yet, it sold very well. Historians agree that frontier liquor was some of the most dangerous stuff ever consumed voluntarily. But here's where it gets wild. Some saloons bragged about how strong or lethal their brews were. One Arkansas bar famously advertised its moonshine as being so strong it'll shave you from the inside. Another reportedly served a drink called coffin varnish. Charming. You throw back the shot. It tastes like betrayal. And wood varnish, with maybe a hint of licorice and motor oil. You stagger for a second but manage to stay upright. Barely. The bartender watches you with mild interest, like he's waiting to see whether you'll puke, pass out, or spontaneously combust. None of those happen, yet, so he grunts his approval and moves on. Welcome to the ecosystem of liquor laws that never existed. Out here, regulation was a punchline. Most towns didn't have enough lawmen to enforce basic safety, let alone alcohol standards. Anyone with a barrel, a still, and a questionable moral compass could become a bartender overnight. Quality control? That was up to Darwin. And yet, people kept drinking. Because what else were they going to do? There weren't many entertainment options beyond cards, brothels, or watching your neighbors argue about fence lines. So alcohol became both social lubricant and coping mechanism. And if it melted a few stomach linings along the way? Well, that was the cost of admission. You slide the shot glass back. The bartender nods, pulls out a different bottle. This one with a handwritten label that just says, X, and pours another. It fizzes slightly. That can't be good either. A quirky little tidbit. In some towns, saloons offered specialty drinks that were basically chemical experiments. In El Paso, there were reports of a drink mixed with kerosene and cayenne pepper. Another town in Colorado had a cocktail involving horse liniment, gin, and what might have been lye. Historians still argue whether people were genuinely enjoying these drinks or just using them as a cheap form of self-harm. You take a cautious sip of X. Instantly regret it. Your vision swims, your spine tingles, and for a split second, you understand the meaning of the universe. Then it's gone, replaced by the urge to sit down very slowly and maybe never get back up. A man beside you laughs. Not at a joke, not even at you, just laughs, like he knows what you just tasted. And he's survived it, and now you're part of the club. He raises his own glass, filled with something that looks disturbingly like axle grease, and toasts your impending demise. You clink glasses. Your liver weeps. Fun fact: some of the worst liquor was sold by traveling salesmen who claimed it cured everything from toothaches to female hysteria. These so-called snake oil elixirs were loaded with alcohol, opiates, or even cocaine. People drank them by the bottle, sometimes unaware they were slowly poisoning themselves. The line between medicine and moonshine was often more of a smudge. You stumble from your stool and make your way to a back table, where a small group is taking turns daring each other to drink from a metal flask labeled, "Don't." You know better, but your curiosity doesn't. You join them. They grin. You drink. And that's when the floor decides to tilt 15 degrees. Time slows. The piano melts into an organ grinder's dirge. You swear the ceiling breathes once. A woman in the corner flickers like a candle and vanishes. You've entered the fourth tier of frontier intoxication, lucid hallucination. Congratulations. Someone tells a joke you can't understand. Everyone laughs, including you. Why? Who knows? Maybe because the world makes more sense sideways. Then the bartender slaps a chunk of jerky onto the bar and says, "Soak it up, or I'm hauling your body out back." You chew. It tastes like leather boot in despair. But it helps. A little. Eventually, the room stabilizes. The hallucinations retreat. The music returns to normal, or at least its usual off-key self. You breathe. You survived. Barely. But you've earned something now. Not just respect, though you might have picked up a bit of that too. No, you've earned understanding. You finally get why these people drink what they drink. Because out here, tomorrow isn't guaranteed. And sometimes, forgetting that fact for just a few hours is worth every last miserable drop. You climb the staircase like it's a test, each creaking step asking if you're sure you want to know what waits above. The saloon below hums with laughter, cards, piano, and the occasional gunshot. But here, on the second floor, everything muffles, softer, warmer, more dangerous. The hallway is narrow, lined with flickering gas lamps and wallpaper that might have once been floral, before time and cigarette smoke blurred it into something resembling bruises. The carpet is worn, the kind that grabs your boots like it wants to keep you from leaving. A woman's voice laughs behind one door. Another creaks open, only for a red-gloved hand to slowly close it again. No words, just the soft click of the latch. You're not alone up here, but you're not exactly welcome either. This is the upstairs world of the brothel, stitched to the saloon like a secret. And tonight, it's wide awake. Brothels were an open secret in the Wild West. Some were hidden behind false walls or accessed through coded phrases at the bar. Others were brazen, marked by red lanterns, velvet curtains, or women leaning from balconies with tired smiles and sharp eyes. Historians agree these boarding houses, or parlor houses, were a central part of frontier life, especially in towns where women were outnumbered by men 10 to 1. Here, sex wasn't a scandal, it was a business. And business was always booming. You pause outside one room where the door is ajar. Inside, a woman sits at a vanity, brushing her hair with long, deliberate strokes. She's humming something, low and eerie, like a hymn sung backward. On the dresser, perfume, lace, a Derringer pistol. You don't linger. Another door opens, and a man exits, dazed and grinning. He walks like someone just took his soul and gave him a receipt. The woman behind him leans on the frame, watching you now. She tilts her head. No invitation, just curiosity. You nod, respectfully. She disappears. They aren't what you expected. The women upstairs are not helpless. They're not naive. They're survivors in corsets, businessmen in bodices. They know more about the town than the mayor, the preacher, and the undertaker combined, because they see everything. Want a quirky tidbit? Some brothels in the West kept detailed ledgers, not just of customers and services, but of overheard plans, rivalries, and betrayals. The madams ran intelligence networks without realizing it. Or maybe they did. Maybe they knew exactly how valuable a secret could be. You reach the end of the hallway, where a door stands open. The room beyond is bathed in amber lamplight. A chaise lounge, silk curtains, a phonograph quietly spinning a crackling melody. A woman sits across from you, cross-legged, smoking something exotic in a long-stemmed pipe. Her eyes are sharp, her smile sharper. You look like you've never been upstairs before. She says. She's right. You sit, not quite sure why. She doesn't offer anything, not a drink, not a proposition, not even her name. Instead, she starts talking about the town, the sheriff, the cattle baron who sleeps with a knife under his pillow, the preacher who visits every Thursday and weeps afterward. She tells you things no newspaper could print, things no man downstairs would ever admit. And you realize, she knows everything. It's not just about sex here. It's about information, influence, control. The women upstairs move through the town like ghosts, present, yet ignored, which makes them dangerous. Madams, especially, often held more real power than elected officials. They owned property. They controlled credit. They could make or break reputations with a whisper. Some even hired armed guards, more than the banks did. One historical fact? Madame Julia Boulette of Virginia City was so beloved and influential that when she was murdered in 1867, the entire town shut down. Her funeral was attended by hundreds. That's not something you learn in schoolbooks. You listen as the woman before you tells you who really owns the saloon. Spoiler. Not the bartender. Who paid off the sheriff last month? Who's about to run out of town with another man's wife and a saddlebag full of gold? Everyone's upstairs eventually, she says, one way or another. You ask her what she means. She just smiles and turns away. You leave quietly, boots soft on the worn carpet. Downstairs, someone's shouting about a stolen watch. A table crashes. The piano plays louder, like it's trying to drown out the chaos. You descend the stairs different than you came up, like you've passed through a veil. The world down here seems less solid now, less real, because upstairs, behind those doors, people trade more than bodies. They trade leverage, control, escape, and no one escapes for free. You think you've seen the power players in this town, gunslingers, sheriffs, gamblers with dead eyes, but then you meet the madam. She's not dressed like royalty, but she might as well be. Her gown is dark, stitched with thread too fine for this dusty town. Her posture commands attention, not with force, but with gravity. When she walks into the room, the conversation lowers a notch, not from fear, But respect. She doesn't need to raise her voice. She doesn't need a gun on her hip. Her weapon is reputation. And everyone knows it. She sits alone at a table near the back of the saloon, sipping something far more expensive than whatever rotgut they serve most patrons. She doesn't speak first. She waits. And when she finally looks at you, you feel like a trespasser in your own skin. Madams in the Wild West weren't side characters, they were kingmakers. In a lawless land where women were outnumbered 10-1, any woman who could gather, manage, and protect a house full of others held a kind of authority that outpaced lawmen, preachers, and even the wealthiest ranchers. Historians agree that madams often held significant influence over town affairs, including elections, land ownership, and banking. And yet, most history books give them a single sentence, if that. But walk a mile in boots like yours and you'll realize, she runs the show. Her name is Evelyn, and she owns this building. Not just the brothel upstairs, but the entire saloon. She collects rent from the barkeep, pays the sheriff's salary, keeps the books for half the businesses in town. She knows what you did last night, who you were with, and where you buried the gun. And she lets you pretend she doesn't. Because you're more useful that way. Want advice? She asks, swirling her glass. Always pay your debts, especially the invisible ones. You nod like you understand. You don't. She continues. Men come and go. Cowboys, soldiers, outlaws. They bring dust and noise. But they don't last. This, she gestures to the saloon. The stairs, the piano, the world, this is mine. Because I built it. Brick by secret. One quirky tidbit. Some madams filed land deeds in the names of trusted employees or lovers to hide their holdings. They operated under aliases, ran multiple houses under different identities, and kept ledgers that could sink half the town if leaked. In at least 2 recorded cases, madams bailed out the sheriff after financial trouble and demanded interest. You ask her how she got started. She doesn't answer, just offers a thin smile and says, "You don't get here without bleeding for it." You believe her. She leans forward, lowering her voice. You want to survive here? Then you'd better stop thinking of this as a town. It's a table. And if you're not holding cards, you're on the table. There's a heavy silence. Then she stands and walks away. You realize you haven't exhaled in 30 seconds. The bartender watches her pass. So does the piano man. So do the men at the poker table. No one speaks her name. But it echoes anyway. Some historians still argue whether madams like her truly held power, or if it was just illusion, borrowed influence in a male-dominated world. But sit across from one. Feel how carefully they weigh every word. And you'll stop doubting. Later, you hear stories. How Evelyn once turned away a gang leader who threatened her girls, told him if he ever came back, his corpse wouldn't be buried deep enough to stop the smell. He never returned. How she offered shelter to a runaway teen, then sent a telegram to the girl's mother in Chicago, with conditions. How she pulled a revolver on a U.S. Marshal and lived. The brothel may be upstairs. But Evelyn's real office is here. This table. This glass. This moment. And now, you're on her radar. Good luck with that. You've been in this saloon long enough to know something's off. Not wrong, just hidden. The kind of quiet you notice only when you're listening for it. A chill behind the laughter. A shadow too still in the corner. Then someone leans in and mutters 4 words that change your whole night. Don't ask about downstairs. You blink. Downstairs? You didn't even know there was a downstairs. You glance toward the far end of the saloon. Past the main bar. Past the hallway where the barkeep disappears every now and then. There's a worn wooden door back there, half sunken into the floorboards. No sign, no light, just a single lock that looks like it hasn't been opened so much as negotiated with. Naturally, you decide to investigate. The bartender doesn't stop you, but his eyes follow you all the way. That's the thing in this town. People rarely say, no. They just watch to see if you come back. You open the door. The stairs creak. The air gets heavier, cooler, smells like old leather. sweat, mildew, and secrets that were never meant to see daylight. You descend into the belly of the beast. Welcome to the underbelly of the Wild West. While the saloon above sings with drunken joy and music, the basement is a different frequency entirely. It hums, it pulses, it waits. You find a low-ceilinged room lit by gas lamps and candles. Men sit at round tables, silent and sharp-eyed. No piano here, just the occasional clink of coins, the rustle of cards, and the dry scrape of a knife being idly sharpened. This is where the real business happens. Forget poker for coin, here. It's blood stakes, property deeds, wagers that decide land ownership, marriages, even futures. You spot one man with a collar, a priest, betting a gold crucifix. Another offers a crate of uncut opium. No one blinks. And over in the darkest corner? A body. Still. Slumped. Maybe asleep. Probably not. Historians acknowledge that some Western saloons included private clubs in their basements, often reserved for the wealthiest, most dangerous, or most desperate. These rooms weren't on any map. No lawmen were invited. And what happened down here? It stayed down here. You step carefully. A man gestures you to join a table. He's got 3 gold rings, one on each finger he still has. You sit. The game isn't poker, it's a dice game you don't recognize. The rules are vague, the stakes whispered. You ask what the buy-in is. He replies, "What are you willing to lose?" Not how much. What? A quirky tidbit. In some basement dens, players bet things you'd never expect, memories. They called them promises. The right to make someone else do a task, no matter what. One legend tells of a gambler who lost the right to say his own name. Whether it's true or not, no one's sure, but historians still argue whether this level of symbolic wagering was folklore or just deeply misunderstood legal arrangements. You lose your first round. Easily. He takes your coin. Then he asks if you'd like to keep playing. The man next to you, missing a nose, incidentally, says nothing but slowly removes a ring and places it on the table. His hand is trembling. You get the feeling that ring wasn't just jewelry. You fold. Quietly. The dealer nods. Not every game is worth winning. On your way out, you spot a cellar door behind a curtain. Curiosity nearly pulls you in. But instinct, finally, slaps your hand. Because there's a smell wafting from there. Something wet and wrong. You climb the stairs. The music returns. The air warms. You step back into the saloon. Blinking at the light, heart thumping louder than the piano. You look the same, but you feel older. No one asks where you went. No one ever does. The bartender pours you a drink without comment. It's stronger than before. Or maybe you're weaker now. And from across the room, Evelyn gives you the smallest nod. Just once. As if to say, now you understand. The next morning, if you can call it that, sunlight barely pierces the haze. You wake to find a card tucked under your glass. Not a playing card, a calling card. Black ink, sharp lettering, a name you don't recognize. But the phrase beneath it you do. We don't rob, we correct mistakes. You ask the bartender. He shrugs. Must have made a friend, he says with a smirk that suggests the opposite. That's how it starts. You meet them later that day. Not in the saloon, but out by the corral, where the dust kicks high and the horses have better manners than most men. A trio of them, matching dusters, blank expressions. One's got a sawed-off strapped to his leg. Another's chewing on a matchstick like it owes him money. The third, probably the leader, tips his hat just enough to let you see the scar tracing his cheek like a map no one wants to follow. Ride with us, he says. Not a question. You nod, because this isn't the kind of offer you turn down. Welcome to the Wild West's entrepreneurial elite, the branded gangs. See, outlaws used to be chaotic, opportunistic, smash and grab types, but by the late 1800s, some of them got smart, organized. Gangs turned into outfits. They had structure, rules, and, believe it or not, branding. Historians confirm groups like the Dalton Gang and the Wild Bunch didn't just rob, they marketed themselves. They took photos, wrote letters, made sure people knew their names. Not for vanity, for intimidation. Recognition was protection. If your gang was famous enough, townsfolk would surrender before you even reached the vault. The group you ride with today? They call themselves the Ledger Men. Their slogan is etched on the inside of their codes. Balance must be restored. And yeah, they carry calling cards. Actual cards. Custom printed. A fringe historical fact, but true. A few outlaw gangs were known to leave symbols or emblems at crime scenes, bullets marked with initials. Coins split in half. One gang even left hand-carved chess pieces. Scholars still debate whether it was bravado or ritual. The Ledger Men aren't chaotic. They're efficient. You're not riding out to rob a stagecoach. You're reclaiming it. Apparently, the last driver cheated a mining outfit. Double-crossed on payroll. These guys have the receipts, literal ones, and they're here to correct the imbalance. The heist is silent, smooth, no shouting, no blood. The coach pulls to a stop like it knows what's coming. The driver doesn't argue, just hands over the lockbox and mutters something about just following orders. One of the Ledger Men hands him a coin for his trouble. For the record, he says, even their crimes come with footnotes. Later, around a campfire, you learn more. They have roles: a treasurer, a quartermaster, a tactician. There's even a scribe, who writes down each job in a leather-bound book. Their crimes are logged like transactions. Mistakes are debts. Every town they pass through gets marked, either with a green check or a red slash, depending on what they left behind. You ask what happens to the towns that get red. They don't answer. Instead, they hand you a ring. It's simple. Brass. Inscribed with a scale. No name. No weight. You're in, says the leader. Just like that. And you wonder how many others joined the same way. How many wore the ring for a week, or a lifetime? How many buried it with shaking hands? Historians still argue whether outlaw gangs had formal initiation rituals or if it was just a matter of loyalty under pressure. But you know this. When they hand you a ring, you don't say no. You ride back into town before dawn. No one sees you enter. But when you sit at the bar, the bartender sets your drink down before you ask. And from somewhere upstairs, Evelyn sends down a fresh bottle, sealed. Private reserve. You don't ask why. Because now, you carry more than a reputation. You carry affiliation. And out here, that's worth more than gold. They don't call it an initiation. They call it balancing. You stand in the alley behind the saloon. Moonlight slicing the shadows into thin, nervous ribbons. The Ledger Men wait silently. No one speaks. No one tells you what's about to happen. You already know. The man kneeling before you has a bag over his head. His hands are tied. One shoe is missing. He mutters a prayer, or maybe a name, something soft and private. The leader steps beside you. Hands you a knife. Not a revolver. Not a rope. A knife. It's old. Rusted. The blade is curved like a smile that's seen too much. It fits in your palm like it was made for you, and for this moment. This isn't about the kill, he says. It's about the wait. The Wild West loved its rituals. Dueling under rules. Hangings at high noon. But the gangs, especially the structured ones, had their own dark rites. And historians, when they're honest, will admit, we know less about those ceremonies than we pretend to. Because the people who survived them didn't talk. And the ones who didn't? Well, you're kneeling over one now. You ask who he is. The leader says, a liar. A debt-maker. A man who cost others their breath. That's all. And here's the part that chills you deeper than any wind off the prairie. You believe him. Because down here, guilt isn't debated. It's weighed. One fringe tidbit? Some gangs were said to use homemade scales, actual brass balance scales, during judgment. A bullet on one side. A gold coin on the other. If the scales tipped the wrong way, the sentence was immediate. Scholars still argue whether that's folklore or frontier theater. But there's one in the ledger men's saddlebags. You saw it. You touched it. You hesitate. The knife feels heavier now. Not in weight, in meaning. They don't force you. They just wait. You hand the knife back. And for a long second, you think they'll kill you instead. But the leader nods. That's weight, too, he says, holding back. Then he does it himself. Clean, quiet, ritualistic. The others close the circle. One of them marks the wall with a red slash. Another drops a token, a copper button, flattened, onto the ground beside the body. You say nothing, because now you understand. Violence here is just accounting. Back at the saloon, you stare at your reflection in the bar mirror. The ring on your finger catches the light. Glinting like an oath, you feel different, not older, not wiser, just rearrange. The bartender doesn't ask where you've been. He just slides a coin across the counter. Not for payment, for memory. Some historians believe gangs used tokens to remember their deeds. A bullet for each life. A stone for each mistake. They passed them around in silence, letting the weight settle where it was due. You pocket the coin, not out of pride, but because now it's yours to carry. Later that night, you see Evelyn again. She doesn't greet you, doesn't ask. She just glances at the ring, then at your eyes. And she knows. You've been balanced. Whether you deserved it or not, that's not the point. Because out here, in the West, they don't write about. Justice isn't blind. It sees everything, and it makes you look right back. You think the sheriff is your safest bet. The one man in town who wears a star instead of a pistol tattoo. The law, right? Wrong. He's in his office when you walk in, boots on the desk. Cigar in his teeth. And a ledger open to a page that looks suspiciously empty. Behind him, a rifle leans against the wall. Untouched. His badge catches the afternoon light. But it's dull around the edges, like it's seen more bribes than bullets. He doesn't ask why you're here. He already knows. Let me guess, he says, tapping ash into a chipped mug. You thought I gave a damn? Sheriffs in the Wild West weren't heroes. Not always. Some were brave, yes. Upholders of a fragile justice in places barely hanging together. But just as often, they were gamblers, drunks, or worse, mercenaries with shiny excuses. Historians note that many sheriffs were elected by popularity, not integrity, and once in office, they set their own rules. This sheriff? He doesn't bother pretending. He flips through the ledger and chuckles. You've been busy, he says, writing with the ledger men, poking around downstairs, talking to Evelyn. You ask if he's going to arrest you. He laughs so hard he chokes. I work for Evelyn, he says, same as everyone else worth a damn. Then he stands, saunters to the window, and peers out like he's watching ghosts go by. But don't worry, he adds, I only arrest people who ask stupid questions. So you don't ask anything else. A mainstream historical fact. Sheriffs often wore multiple hats. Some were also the town coroner, tax collector, or undertaker. In smaller settlements, the same man could sentence you, bury you, and sell your saddle. Some even moonlighted as bounty hunters, arresting men by day, then collecting rewards by night. This sheriff? He just pockets the fines before they hit the books. Want to stay out of jail? He says. Buy me a drink sometime. Or don't. Just don't cross Evelyn, or the ledger men, or the preacher, or me. You nod. He offers a cigar. You refuse. He lights one anyway and says, suit yourself. Dying's easier when you don't see it coming. A quirky tidbit? Some sheriffs in notorious boomtowns kept two logbooks, the real one and the tourist-friendly one. The first had names, bribes, and body counts. The second had stories of heroism and dusty showdowns. Historians still argue which versions of these towns survive today, the truth, or the edited cuts sold to Eastern newspapers. As you leave the office, a drunk stumbles in, waving a pistol and demanding justice over a stolen horse. The sheriff takes one look at him, rolls his eyes, and points toward the door. Try the preacher, he says, or Evelyn. Hell, Try the piano man. And just like that, the man is gone. You look back one more time. The sheriff is already back at his desk. Ledger open, boots up, and law nowhere in sight. Back on the street, the town looks different. Not cleaner, not darker, just transparent. Now you see the wires. The favors owed, the silent nods, the glances that carry more threat than a gun. You thought the gangs were the danger? No, the real threat wears a badge and smiles. And when justice rides into town, it checks in at the brothel, drinks itself blind, and leaves by morning, quietly, politely, like a guest who knows better than to overstay its welcome. You sit in a pew that creaks like it resents you. The church smells like wax and old guilt. Stained glass windows cast fractured rainbows across cracked wooden floors. And somewhere behind you, a baby cries, though no one's holding one. The preacher steps up to the pulpit. He's tall, gaunt, eyes like storm clouds. He opens his Bible but never looks at it. He doesn't have to. You've all sinned, he says, voice calm as a rattlesnake's hiss. Some of you just haven't paid yet. The congregation doesn't murmur. They nod. They agree. Because out here, Sunday morning isn't about redemption. It's about remembering who's watching. Fact. Churches popped up quickly in frontier towns. Often before jails or schools. It was less about saving souls and more about soothing investors. A church meant civilization, respectability, a sign that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't hell with whiskey. But after sundown, the preacher changes his clothes. And the sermon changes locations. You follow him that night, not out of suspicion, but because Evelyn quietly suggested it. He rides out with two others. No Bible, no lantern, just saddlebags and determination. You trail behind, far enough to stay invisible, close enough to catch the truth. They meet a man near the ridge. He's tied up, hands behind his back, knees muddy. He's pleading. You expect a confrontation. Instead, the preacher kneels, not in prayer, to open a box. Inside, dynamite, rope, a map. They aren't here to save. They're here to steal. Train leaves at dawn. The preacher says, we'll be on it. And just like that, you realize the Wild West had its own clergy. Men who stood in pulpits by day and robbed rails by night. Historians have found evidence, buried in trial transcripts and old journals, of preachers who doubled as outlaws. They weren't common, but they were real. Some claimed they robbed to fund churches. Others just enjoyed the irony. Scholars still argue whether these men were corrupt from the start or broke under the weight of frontier life. Back in town, the preacher greets you the next day like nothing's happened. Offers a firm handshake and a quiet blessing. He knows you saw, but he also knows you won't say anything. Why? Because you know better now. This town runs on secrets and mutual silence. And the church? It's just another room in the saloon. One with better lighting and worse confessions. A quirky tidbit? Some frontier churches installed trapdoors under the pulpit. Officially, they were for ventilation or access to supplies. Unofficially, they offered quick exits when sermons ran long or past sins caught up. One preacher in Arizona reportedly vanished mid-sermon. Never seen again. Some say it was the trapdoor. Others say it was judgment. Back at the saloon, the piano man plays a hymn. Nobody notices. Or they pretend not to. You take a drink, sit at your usual seat, and think about the preacher's words. Some of you just haven't paid yet. You wonder which bill he meant. And how soon it's due. You think you've seen strange. Then you meet the cowboys with pupils the size of dinner plates. Grinning like they've forgotten how doors work. One's giggling into a spoon. Another's serenading his boot. The third keeps asking what day it is, between sneezes that smell faintly of roses. You've entered the pharmacy of the frontier. And it's not behind a counter. It's in plain view. A dusty shack on the edge of town. Painted like a barn but guarded like a bank. Inside, there's a man called Dr. Witt. He's not a real doctor, unless you count the honorary degree he claims he received, by mail. What he is, though, is popular. Because he sells what the saloon can't. Oblivion. Welcome to the opium den. Mainstream historical fact? Drugs in the Wild West weren't just present, they were everywhere. Laudanum, a mix of opium and alcohol, was sold over the counter as a remedy for everything from coughs to heartbreak. Cocaine toothache drops were advertised in family newspapers. Even children were prescribed morphine for teething. One sip at a time. The frontier numbed itself. You watch a man down a vial labeled, "Widow's Relief." 5 minutes later, he's crying about a horse he never owned. Another licks a mirror for reasons no one asks. There's a young girl in the corner clutching a bottle of something purple. Eyes fixed on the ceiling like it's about to whisper the secrets of the universe. A cowboy staggers past you, laughing, eyes glassy. "I feel like tumbleweed," he says, then falls into a barrel. No one helps him up. You ask Dr. Witt what's in these elixirs. He winks and says, "Trade secret," then pulls out a bottle labeled, "Snake Oil Tonic." Guaranteed to make you forget your own name. A quirky tidbit? Snake oil wasn't a joke originally. It was based on Chinese remedies brought by immigrants, using real oil from the Chinese water snake. But once hucksters in the West caught on, they replaced it with mineral oil, turpentine, and chili powder, sold it with fanfare, and disappeared before the side effects hit. Some historians argue the term, snake oil, evolved into the modern word for fraud directly from these frontier antics. And yet, people kept buying. Because out here, you didn't take medicine to heal. You took it to pause. You try a bottle. Just a sip. It tastes like cinnamon, rust, and bad decisions. Within seconds, your legs go warm, your head goes light, and your worries drift into the floorboards. You forget the ledger men. You forget Evelyn. You even forget your own last name for a minute. But then the warmth fades. And you're left with a splitting headache and the taste of guilt. Dr. Witt pats your shoulder. "Everything's temporary," he says. "That's what makes it worth it." Later that evening, you see the sheriff stumble into the same shack. He leaves with a full bottle and an empty holster. You remember what Evelyn told you. Everyone's upstairs eventually, one way or another. Turns out, downstairs works too. Historians still debate whether frontier addiction was a crisis or just a coping mechanism. After all, there weren't therapists, no self-help books, no rest, just open land, open wounds, and one long road west. And so the cowboys kept drinking. The mothers kept dosing. The preachers kept sniffing. And the world spun on. You return to the saloon that night. Everything looks the same, but you feel off. Like something inside you has tilted just slightly out of place. The piano man plays a lullaby. You can't tell if it's comforting or a warning. You sit at the bar and pour water. And for once, no one laughs. It starts with a violin. High, sharp, and oddly beautiful, sawing through the smoke-choked air of the dance hall like it's carving space for something sacred. You step inside expecting sin. And find choreography instead. This isn't a brothel. Not exactly. This is a show. Painted ladies in flounced skirts whirl across polished floors. Partnered with minors who haven't seen a bath in weeks but can still count to 4 if the beat is loud enough. Boots stomp. Spurs jingle. A fiddle player shreds with one eye closed and both hands moving like lightning. The walls shake. You step aside just in time to avoid a high kick to the chest. Welcome to the family-friendly face of frontier debauchery. Dance halls were common across the West, especially in boontowns where lonely men outnumbered everyone else. They offered music, drink, and something between hope and distraction. The girls weren't necessarily prostitutes, but they weren't saints either. For the right coin, they might dance with you. For a little more, they might listen to your troubles. Beyond that, depends who's watching. Historians agree. Dance halls were part entertainment, part therapy, part hustle, and sometimes, they were bloodbaths. You find a spot near the bar, careful not to get swept into the spinning chaos. A man next to you is humming along, drink in hand, Smile wide, until he collapses forward with a knife in his back. No one screams. Not right away. The music stumbles but doesn't stop. The dancers swirl around the fallen body like a river parting around a rock. Then the second knife hits. Now it's a duel. Two men, locked in a slow-motion brawl. One holding a bottle like a sword. The other swinging a chair leg like he's fencing ghosts. Blood smears across the floorboards. Someone claps, possibly drunk. Possibly supportive. This is not unusual. In fact, it's almost expected. A quirky tidbit? In some dance halls, management kept a chalkboard near the entrance. Not for drink specials. For body counts. The weekly tally of injuries, fights, and fatalities, used partly as a deterrent, partly as advertising. 3 duels this week, no casualties. Bring your mother. Scholars still argue whether this was dark humor or genuine record-keeping. Either way, you start checking the floor for chalk when you walk into new rooms now. The music changes again, faster now. More frantic. The fiddler looks possessed. A woman climbs onto the bar and starts tapping her boots like the devil owes her money. The crowd roars. And just like that, the death is forgotten. Fun must go on. You move toward the back, where a group of performers are prepping for the next act. One of them, tall, red hair, painted lips, leans close and whispers, "Watch your pockets. And your pride." She hands you a handkerchief. Blood-streaked. Not yours. You take it anyway. Dance halls had rules, but not the kind you read. You learned them the hard way. Rule 1. Never say no when asked to dance. Rule 2. Never touch first. Rule 3. If someone disappears mid-song, don't ask why. These weren't laws. They were survival tips. You watch a new couple take the floor. She's poised, graceful. He's shaking slightly, nervous, young. Probably new to town. They spin together like a dream. Then someone steps on the wrong foot. The entire dance hall holds its breath. The man who got stepped on, an older cowboy with a silver tooth and a broken nose, reaches into his coat. You brace. But the piano man plays louder. The moment passes. Just barely. Historians point out that frontier dance halls were one of the few places where women held authority. The dance girls weren't just performers, they were gatekeepers. They decided who danced, who drank, and who stayed breathing. Cross one, and you might find yourself thrown into the alley. Or the river. Or worse, ignored. Which, out here, can be a death sentence. You leave the hall sometime after midnight. Ears ringing, eyes still catching the ghost flickers of skirts in motion. The silence outside is brutal. Too wide. Too still. You realize you were safer inside that storm of music and knives than you are now. Under the open sky, the West doesn't just kill you with guns. Sometimes it dances you to death. There's a town in the distance that shouldn't exist. No name on the map. No rail lines near it. No stagecoach routes through it. But everyone in the saloon talks about it, softly. And always with the same look. Like they've tasted something rotten and can't spit it out. You ride there anyway. Because some stories don't knock. They whisper. And this one whispers, Barlow. It takes you the better part of a day to get there. The trail feels wrong, too still. Too quiet. Birds don't chirp. The wind avoids you. Even your horse starts glancing back like maybe you should turn around. You don't. Barlow sits in a bowl of land, surrounded by hills that lean in like eavesdropping giants. The main street is wide. Too wide. Like it's bracing for a parade that never came. And at the center? A saloon. Bigger than it should be. 3 stories high. Painted black. Though most of the color has bled into the wind. There's no name on the sign. Just a single word carved into the doorframe. Sanctuary. You don't buy that for a second. Inside, the air is cool and thick. Velvet drapes. Gas lamps that burn without flickering. A woman at the bar nods once and slides you a drink before you speak. You didn't order. She knew anyway. The place is full. Every table taken. Every seat occupied. And not a single voice raised. You walk past men with scars in the shape of state lines. Women with eyes like bayonets. A child who might be 12 or might be 60. Everyone here is wrong in a way that's hard to name. And yet, they're all smiling. This is the saloon that ate a town. A mainstream fact? There were establishments in the West that held total control over their communities. Owned the land, paid the workers, sold the supplies, rented the rooms. Company towns, mining monopolies, saloons that acted as banks, stores, courts. If you crossed them, you didn't eat or live. Barlow takes that idea and pushes it past the edge. You're told by a man with tattooed knuckles that no one leaves Barlow without permission. And those who do, return different. If they return at all. You learn of the lady upstairs. No one calls her by name. She owns the saloon, owns the town. Evelyn once called her the ledger no one can balance. And if Evelyn is scared, you should be too. You're offered a room. You accept. It's plush. Too plush. There are fresh sheets. The pillow smells like lavender and regret. The window has no latch. You notice that only once it's too late. The next morning, you try to leave. Your horse is gone. The road is gone. The bartender simply shrugs. Try again tomorrow, he says. You'll feel better by then. A quirky tidbit? There were legends, scattered, hushed, of frontier towns that weren't real. Places that appeared for a season. Trapped wanderers. Then vanished. Folklore. Surely. But scholars still argue whether towns like Barlow were ever based on truth, or if they were warnings in disguise. You spend 3 days in Barlow. You forget what day it is. You forget your own handwriting. The drink never runs out. The piano never stops. The smiles never change. And when you finally do leave, if you ever did, you swear the hills around the town lean back. Like they're letting you go. Back in your saloon. No one believes you. Except Evelyn. She meets your eyes. Just once. And says, that place never leaves you. She's right. Because in your dreams now, there's always a black saloon. Waiting. You return change. Not in the way people notice right away. Your boots still crunch the same dirt. Your hands still tremble just after dusk. Your eyes still scan every alley and rooftop. But there's something quieter now. A drag in your breath. A twitch behind your smile. Because once you've been through all of it, the saloons, the brothels, the basements and the Barlows, nothing really fits right anymore. You sit at the bar like always. Same stool. Same drink. Different you. The bartender doesn't ask questions. He just slides a folded note your way. No words spoken. You open it. 2 words. It's done. You don't know what exactly. You don't want to. But the weight lifts anyway, just slightly. Then Evelyn walks in. She doesn't make an entrance. She arrives. People shift to make room. Not because they have to, but because gravity makes them. She nods toward the back room. You follow. There, behind velvet curtains and the smell of cedar and cigar smoke, she pours you a glass of something real. No poison. No memory wiper. Just whiskey, aged and earned. You've seen it all now. She says. You nod. Most people don't make it this far. She continues. They get eaten by it. Bit by bit. Some with bullets. Some with kindness. You think about the sheriff. The preacher. The ledger men. Barlow. You ask her the question that's been burning through your ribs since this started. Was it worth it? She looks at you. And says. That depends. Are you gonna stay? You don't answer. Because you don't know. The Wild West doesn't end. It waits. It waits in the bottom of bottles. In whispers from brothel balconies. In the moment just before a duel. In the rustle of cards. The glint of a knife. The scratch of a match. It waits in you. And here's the thing most people never understand. The real Wild West wasn't about guns or gold. It wasn't about the land or the law. It was about what happens when no one's watching. And now? Someone's always watching. You leave the room with Evelyn's words echoing behind your ribs like thunder that hasn't decided whether to strike. The piano plays. The bartender hums. A newcomer walks through the saloon doors. They look around, unsure. Raw. Just like you once were. You lift your glass in their direction. Welcome to the West. The saloon fades now. The sawdust settles. The music slows. That last note from the piano lingers longer than it should, stretching across time like a ghost refusing to leave. You lean back. Close your eyes. Let the world exhale. Maybe the whiskey helped. Maybe it was the ride. Or the silence in the church before the sermon. Or that long, wide road to Barlow, where nothing made sense and yet everything fit too perfectly. You think of Evelyn's smile, sharp, tired, amused, of the sheriff's boots on the desk, of the girl upstairs who knew your story before you ever spoke it, of the knife you didn't use, of the dance that nearly turned deadly, of the preacher, preaching by day and robbing by moonlight. You think of the stairs down to the basement, and the stairs up to the girls, and how neither ever truly let you back the same way you came. It's okay. You made it. Not everyone does. This place, this world, it doesn't promise answers. Just stories. Broken, brilliant, half-true stories that you carry now. Whether you want to or not. You take a deep breath. Not because it clears anything up. Just because it's the first one you've taken without fear in days. The saloon is quieter now. The cards are down. The guns are holstered. The ghosts have curled up behind the whiskey barrels to sleep. And you? You'll dream tonight. Of sawdust and stars. Of women in velvet. Of men with secrets. Of a piano that never stopped playing. Even when everything else did. Sweet dreams. Cowboy.